Hi, welcome. My name is Julie Buick, and I am a Parent Information Specialist and Trainer with Starbridge. Today's presentation is going to be on the topic of discipline and suspension. Today you're going to be seeing it in 3 different segments, starting with this first segment. The topic will give you a basis of knowledge around procedures and safeguards for students with disabilities in regards to discipline and suspension. We will be covering a lot of information during our time together, but you will also have a lot of helpful resources and handouts to reference as you are needing them. So we're going to look at short-term removal when it comes to suspension. A suspension, which is a short-term removal of a student from school for behavioral infraction. The short-term suspension consists of 5 consecutive days or less, while a long-term suspension will consist of, it will be in excess of 5 days. An in-school suspension is a suspension that takes place in school. The student remains in the school building. He or she regularly attends, but receives instruction in another room for disciplinary reasons. Students with a disability must continue to appropriately progress in the general education curriculum. They will continue to receive the services specific to their IEP, and they will continue to participate with non-disabled children to the extent that they would have in their current placement. So here we're looking at the short-term suspension, which is 5 days or less, and we're also looking at a short-term suspension happening in school, which means the student comes to school to receive their services. Keep in mind that there's the teacher that might be providing the instruction. It could be a certified teaching assistant, so that's just something to take note of. When we look at out-of-school suspension, an out-of-school suspension occurs in a different setting outside of the school building. So it could be, for instance, a library. It could be at your own home or another location. If compulsory school age, alternative instruction must begin within 1 to 2 days of suspension. It must also be equivalent to the instruction received prior to suspension. In other words, they need to be making gains and making progress in relation to their IEP and their annual goals and the curriculum that they would have received in the school district if they were in class. So again, it needs to happen within 1 to 2 days of school that they're giving tutoring. And then when we're looking at outside of the school, we're looking at, it can be anywhere other than school. So it could be the town library, it can be your home. You want to look for a location that's not going to be distracting, but that is going to allow both the tutor and your child to engage in the back and forth necessary to do the instruction. So suspension of 1 to 5 days. Best practice, the school should be sending you a written parent notice. They should also talk and meet with the student to make sure that they understand what is happening, why they're being suspended, and what that means, how long they're going to be suspended for, and when they're allowed to come back to school. If it's out of the school suspension, how long will it take them to come back to school? And when they are suspended, it means that you can't come onto school grounds as well. And then if it's in school, they'll be coming into school. They need to know where the location is and what are the expectations during that suspension. Also, the school should be making phone calls to the parents, and if possible, conduct an informal conference, just so that there's clarification around the expectations, how long, especially if you're hitting into that 4 and 5 day mark, just so everybody's on the same page. And if possible, does anything need to change, or does any other supports need to be looked at, or does a CSC meeting need to happen? And then again, if it's compulsory school age, which is looking at that 6 to 16 years range, we need to be looking at alternative instruction. And again, we can be home instruction at this it could either be at the school and the library. So we need to be making sure that we're providing that instruction, that tutoring or the in-school suspension is an out-of-school suspension. So all of that stuff should be discussed, and you should have clarification around the parameters and the expectations. Keep in mind that if you are being called on a daily basis to come and pick up your child from school, that is not a suspension necessarily. That may just be an intervention they're doing with your permission, which they're calling you, letting you know that your child is not having a good day. Maybe they're asking you to come and pick them up. If there is no suspension, there's no record of your child being sent home or that you're coming to pick them up on a, could be a couple times a week that this might be happening. So good practice on our end. I always tell families that the paper trail is really important. It's also really important that we have our safeguards in place to support our children. So if they're asking you to pick up on a repeated basis, you may want to either have a conversation about what's going on and does there need to be some additional supports and services? Do you need to look at a behavior plan, functional behavior assessment kinds of things? Or should it be documented as a suspension? Parents also have the right to push back a little bit and to say, I'm not going to pick him up today. And then put it back on them to figure out, are they going to be suspending him or her, or are they going to continue to try to meet their needs that day, and provide instruction and provide the necessary supports and services that need to happen for that child to be successful. So if that's happening, you just want to kind of push them along a little bit, just because you want to make sure that there's protections going on. So that's why it's really important to have it documented, because it creates, one, a paper trail. It also safeguards your student if things escalate. So if your child, if it escalates and your child then lashes out, and there needs to be an actual suspension, maybe a long-term suspension, maybe a short-term suspension, because you have documentation that you've been picking up, or because you have documentation that he's been suspended, or she's been suspended, then you're going to have some safeguards that we're going to get into later in this presentation. But your child's going to have safeguards, and there's going to be a procedure and policy that needs to be followed that will give them some protections. And it also, by documenting and asking for them to actually make it a formal suspension, you're providing necessary information that potentially there needs to be more supports and more intervention added into the program. Perhaps you need to be going to a CSE meeting and asking for a program review. So I don't always see suspension as a negative. Suspension is actually a very positive, can be very positive for everyone if it helps a student get what they need. So just think about that as we go along around suspension. Nobody likes to hear that their child is having a difficult time at school. No one likes to be told that their child is being suspended. No one wants to get those calls to come pick up. But I view it as information that the child is trying to tell us something, and they might need a little bit more supports and services. So now we're moving on to a slide that shows you kind of what a discipline referral may look like. And here, these might happen when there's no suspension. These might happen when there is a suspension. Usually, these are going to be kept within the principal's office. The principal, the disciplinarian, the student school will probably be kind of holding on to these just so that there's a file in place so that everything's being collected and kept in one place. So it could be in your child's file in the office, but it could also be kept with the principal. But generally, we're going to be looking at a discipline referral that's being made around for your child, which could maybe be a detention, it could just be a warning, but it could also lead to a suspension. So here's just an example of one where it just talks to you a little bit about it tells you to fill in where the name of the child would go, the teacher, the room. So that now you know where it happened. So usually the person filling out, that's going to be where it happened. Some of them will have other, who was involved, what was the issue that happened. This one says the problem, and then it has some checkoffs. There may not be every checkoff for every single thing that can happen. So this is kind of a generic of, possibilities of maybe the things that do usually happen within the course of a day. but then you'll have a see where there's a parent signature there as well. So some of these may need parent signature, some of them may not. Some of these might be coming home to you already, some of them may not be coming home, and you don't really know that there's been incidents that have been going on all year. So anytime I'm hearing that a student is having difficulties and there's behaviors, there's parents being called, there could be possibility of in-school or out-of-school suspension, I'll often tell families that's a great time for them to go into either review their file or to call up the principal and just say that you would like copies of any of the disciplinary reports or referrals that have been made, just so you have a paper trail at home, so that you know what's going on, so you have a full picture. And this is going to be helpful in deciding what to do next, whether or not you need to have a team meeting, whether or not you need to have a CSE meeting, whether or not you need to be asking for a specific evaluation. So this is just going to help you get more data that supports your next step. So again, this is good practice. Now we're looking at the compulsory age that we were talking about before when we look at short-term and long-term suspension. Now, for a student who is it has to be 6 years old, so some kindergartners might be in that 5-year range. If you're at 5-year range and you're being sent home, you're being suspended, you're not going to be entitled to the tutoring service necessarily. Now, every school district is different, so I say that, but then this is kind of where I tell you the legal law says they only have to provide tutoring for kids between the ages of 6 and 16. Now, in some districts, they may offer you or allow you to have tutoring services at the age of 5. It also says that it goes up until 16, and as we know, students are still in high school past the age of 16. Some of them might be in school, graduating when they're 17, some of them when they're 18, and some of our students will be going to school until they're 21. Now, again, I tell you that this is the policy, but that comes down from New York State, so that's more of a regulation or a law that says you have to provide tutoring for ages 6 to 16. However, a school district can provide for any age. It's up to them to offer more, but at a minimum, they have to meet that requirement. And also at a minimum, they only have to provide either 1 hour for a student. And I'm going to get into that a little bit further, but if a student is in elementary school, generally you're going to see 1 hour of tutoring a day. And for students who are middle school, high school, up to the age of 16, you're going to see a minimum of about 2 hours a day. And again, those are minimum requirements. The school must provide alternative instruction to a student with a disability who has been suspended for less than 10 days in a school year if the student is of compulsory school age. If the student is not, then alternative instruction must be provided if such education services are otherwise provided to non-disabled students. So again, this goes back to what the school is kind of doing compassionately for all of their students, regardless of disability or no disability. So if a school district is a little bit more giving, you can inquire about, is there tutoring available for this specific student? But again, they only have to provide it for the ages between 6 and 16. So again, we're looking at the alternative instruction, which is in this situation is we're talking about tutoring. And for kindergartners, elementary school, we're looking at, so kindergarten through 6th grade. So once they come out, if they're in the elementary school years, again, we're looking at 1 hour daily. For middle school, 7th grade to 12th grade up, we're looking at 2 hours minimum daily. And again, I say that these are minimum. It is rare that we see students get more than the minimum, but on occasion it's necessary to give more support. If a student needs more support in order to make progress, in order to have all of their, be able to have the content that they need in order to make gains and progress, we tend to use the words free appropriate education. So if they need a little bit more, then we need to have the conversations about what it may look like and what the more looks like. So again, these are the minimums. It's rare that I see a district give more than the minimum, but it's not that it's off the table. You can always ask for more. You just want to make sure that you help them to understand and you have good information and data that supports why your individual child may need a little bit more than that 1 hour or 2 hour of instruction. So now we're moving ahead to disciplinary removal. So a disciplinary removal, and this is coming directly from our part 201.2, which is the regulations for New York State. And the regulations are, you have your regulations around CSE committee, and then you have the regulations around discipline and suspension. So I am talking specifically around suspension and discipline, and it's 201.2. It's a removal of a student with a disability for disciplinary reasons from the student's current educational placement other than a suspension. So we're talking about a removal in this situation that may not warrant an out-of-school suspension, but they have been removed from where all of their typical, their friends are, where the other students are. So they're being removed from instruction, possibly. They're being removed from phys ed class. They're being removed from, let's say, the cafeteria. So anytime that they're being removed and put into another location that's different than everybody else, we're looking at a disciplinary removal. So in this situation, you're seeing a picture of a student, a young lady who is in the hallway. So she's being told that because maybe she's being disruptive, maybe something happened, and this person is making the choice to put her out in the hallway for a certain amount of time. That is now a removal. You may not know about all the removals that are happening for your child, for students. So again, when I was talking about asking to see documentation, this is why you want to see documentation, because not only are there possible, not only are they doing suspensions and have a paper trail on that, but there should be a paper trail on removals from instruction, removal from a classroom setting. And this also, depending on the severity of how many times it's happening, the duration, the length, what the behavior was. This would also be really great information regarding those safeguards. And when we look at changing what now is referred to as a placement change in this kind of a situation, we're changing the placement of where the child needs to be. So we need to be looking at how many times has that occurred, and does that constitute a kind of like a suspension in a sense? And does it mean that we need to put more services in place? What's this information telling us? Again, it could mean that we need to look at behavior plans, behavior supports. We might need to ask for another CSE meeting. We definitely need to have a team meeting, especially if it's happening in the same academic area, the same class, the same teacher every day, or a few times a week. Then we need to start having conversations. The disciplinary removal is also the change in placement of a student with a disability to an alternative educational setting by an impartial hearing officer. So if somebody comes in and they decide that the student needs an outside, they need something a little bit different, then that would be constitutive change of placement. So change of placements will happen in a couple of different ways. One, the student is being removed out of the classroom every day, or a hearing officer, an impartial hearing officer, decides that the student needs something a little bit more restrictive during this time. So those are kind of the two times that we see disciplinary removals. Again, this goes back to the Part 200s, and you do have a resource on the Part 200s and the discipline and suspension procedures for students with disabilities. So those resources are available to you, and you can read a little bit more about that specific information, and it's something to reference back as you need it. And again, good practice here would be to call the parents and talk about a removal. The principal should have, at this point, have conversations with the teacher involved or any other person involved. They should have a conversation with the students. And then they should be calling you, the parent, to let you know that there has been a removal that took place, and pretty much what's going to happen. And hopefully, that's a one-time occurrence. But if it is something that's been repeated, then you want to use that opportunity talking with the principal, just to inquire about a team meeting or what else needs to be done in order for this not to happen again and to kind of safeguard the student. I hope that makes sense. So now we're going to be moving on to the school is calling. So again, we kind of talked about this earlier. The school calls, they're calling weekly, they're calling daily, they're calling a couple times a week, but the school is calling. They're asking you to pick up. They're saying that your child is having a bad day. When this happens, the student is removed from their current educational placement. And when that happens, it should be counted. Any portion of the day that this is happening, it should be counted as a removal. Um, Students really cannot be sent home for having a bad day, just off the record. Anytime a student is being sent home, you're being called to come pick up. That is out of the norm. All right, so that needs to be discussed in great detail about what is that really. Are you suspending my child? If it's only happening once or twice during the whole year, maybe it's nothing to worry about. But if it's happening on a repeated basis, then it really is cause for concern. You're going to want to ask, what do they mean by a bad day? What's happening? When is it happening? What's going on for the child before it happens? What's kind of the payoff when it happens? Are they able to go to the nurse's office every day? Are they able to call you every day to come pick them up? Is it learned behavior kinds of stuff? Because if there really truly is behavior there, then again we want to look at possibly asking for a functional behavior assessment, which then would be looking at the need for a positive behavior plan to be put in place. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is as we move forward. What is a behavior plan? Those kinds of things. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I know that Krista, her presentation is on functional behavior assessment, so she's really going to target that area for you. So if you're in this kind of a situation, your child is really struggling, you're going to have a lot of information about that process and how to initiate that evaluation to start. But I'm just giving you kind of just just a little bit of food for thought here, and just kind of to spin around the idea of, if this is happening for my child, should I be doing a little bit something more? And you also, if the child, if they are being suspended, you also just want to make sure that you have a written notice, something written from the school when you go to pick up that they are being suspended. Again, you want to make sure that hits that file, because that's the safeguarding and the paper trail. Again, suspension's not necessarily a negative. It's just more information for us, and it's going to be helpful if you got to get back into your team, whether you have a 504 meeting, whether you have a CSE meeting. Just is going to be very helpful for you to be able to say, hey, now I'm getting calls, now I'm coming to pick up, my child is missing instruction, they're not even getting tutoring during that time, and my child's getting further and further behind. We need to do something, and we need to help my child, this particular student. So what are some reasons for suspension? There's a lot of different reasons for suspensions. You have a code of conduct in your school district. If you haven't seen the code of conduct, I highly recommend that you do take a look at that. After you're done with this presentation today, maybe you want to get online to your school's website and take a look at that. But here are some grounds and some reasons for suspension. Insubordination is one of them. And we kind of defined insubordination as defiance of authority, the refusal to obey orders. Talking back could be seen as insubordinate. This young man on the picture is covering up his ears, shutting his eyes. He's pretty much saying, I'm not listening to you. You can't tell me what to do. That could be seen as insubordinate. I'm sure a lot of our kids might have some of that goes on for them, because maybe they feel like, some sensory stuff goes on. It could be taken out of not really understanding, it's out of context, or it truly could be a student who's saying, not me, I'm not listening to you, you can't tell me what to do. So these are kind of some reasons, some definitions and some reasons why a student would be suspended. Not following a directive, a clear direction from a teacher, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be their teacher, it could be another teacher in the school giving a direct order and the child is not listening. And that specific teacher could therefore say that the student was insubordinate and could start the process for suspension. And then in this situation, it could be intentionally ignoring the ask of a teacher. So again, this guy looks like he actually is intentionally ignoring. Then we look at disorderly as another reason for suspension. Disorderly is disruptive to others. It could be creating an environment that is difficult to learn in. So they're not only affecting themselves, but they're really affecting others and the instruction that's happening. They could also be putting themselves or others in unsafe situations. So I think about like a fire drill and the kids are outside and they're, and there's some messing around, maybe some rough play is starting. Somebody could be viewing that as disorderly. They're causing a little bit of a chaos. They're promoting an unsafe environment. So it can look a lot of different ways, but it is another reason for the removal or suspension of a student. Then we look at violence, violent. So what does that look like? This one is pretty evident. When we look at violence, we're looking at physical harm. So using or involving physical force towards yourself and others or towards school property. So when we look at the code of conduct, it not only includes people, it also includes school property. And then we have disruptive behavior. So disruptive is what looks like unruly, troublesome behavior that gets in the way, again, of education for self and others. It takes away from instruction. It creates, again, a little bit of chaos. It's very distracting, so this is going to be disruptive behavior. And again, this could be grounds for suspension and removal of a student. And these are generally going to be, if it's, especially if it's just the one time that happened, generally we're looking probably at like a 1 to 5 day, probably a short-term suspension. If a student has a repeated record of doing these kinds of behaviors and causing a little bit more, we could be moving into, another area. It could be a little bit longer, but generally we're looking at a small 1 to 5 day suspension for these. So again, I really highly recommend that if you haven't seen your code of conduct, if you get it every year and you're just like, yeah, I'm just tired of seeing that book, I really highly recommend that if you have a student that really is struggling, maybe with behaviors, maybe with, how to be appropriate and how to follow directions, how to, really is, having some difficulty with that, that you yourself read through the code of conduct and you support your child and review that with your child on an as needed basis. Sometimes the student only needs to look at that once and they can retain it, they understand it. Some of our children need to be broken down. They need the rules to be broken down. They need the code of conduct to be broken down in a clear, understanding way. They also you may need to break it down specifically to what's the behavior for bus, what's the behavior for class, what's the behavior for PE class, what's the behavior for unstructured times, structured times. So you might need to break it down even further. And those structured and unstructured times are very different, and a lot of our kids get in trouble in those unstructured times. So, that's going to be really important too, to help our children to understand that the code of conduct is that it's going on at all times, that those expectations are there every single minute of the day. Just because you leave and you go into the hallway doesn't mean those expectations don't exist anymore. So we really have to make sure that our kids have a clear understanding for the expectations and know that they are for every single one of the school's environments. If your kids are still doing recess, the cafeteria, the bus, the grounds, walking to and from the front of the building, going to the bus, being at the bus stop even, that they really understand that they need to uphold to the code of conduct and to the rules that are there. So this ends my first section on discipline and suspension. So you're going to have 2 more sections after this. And again, this is session 1, and I thank you so much for being here and being with me on this first section, and I look forward to talking with you for the next couple. Thanks and have a good one. Bye.